In number 6, you are given a situation where you're opening a retail shop in Oakland Mall, and they're asking you to calculate how many units you need to sell to break even. And break even means when your costs are equal to your revenue. So there's no profit, but there's also no loss. So we are given costs and revenue in this table here. Some of your costs are rent, employee costs, we're hiring people and paying people to work there, and then cost per unit. The rent and the employees for the cost you must pay every month no matter what. So this is your fixed cost. These two are your fixed cost. Now, in mathematical terms, this is what's called the y-intercept. The reason it's called the y-intercept is because this is where x is equal to 0. Where if you don't make any units at all, how much do you still have to pay? Where do you start at with your cost equation? So, when you're writing an equation in slope-intercept form, your b is your initial cost, whatever you have to pay no matter how many units you make. So if you make 0 units, what do you have to pay? In this case, it's going to be 1,600 plus 4,800, which is equal to 6,400. So that is the amount you have to pay no matter how many units you actually make. Now, your variable cost is your cost per unit, $6. That cost changes depending on how many units you actually make. So that becomes what's known as your slope, or your rate of change. So your m is your $6 per unit. So your first equation is y equals 6x plus 6,400. This is your cost equation. Your revenue portion also has an equation, but there's only one given or piece of information in there. It's revenue per unit. How much money do you make, or how much money do you take in per unit? Not necessarily how much profit, but how much money do you take in from the customer? So per unit, you make $35. So if you sell nothing, you make $0. So the y-intercept for this is 0. So my b value is going to be 0. There's no guaranteed revenue for the retail store. However, the variable revenue is the $35 per unit. That is your m, your slope. So the revenue equation is going to be y equals 35x. And you don't have to write plus 0 because it's unnecessary. So we'll label this revenue. Now, break even is when this cost equation is equal to that revenue equation. And since they're both, divide both sides by 29. And you're going to have to round this number. So when you set them equal to each other, you're going to have 6x plus 6,400 is equal to 35x. In order to solve this, subtract 6x from both sides. You get 6,400 equals 29x. And then divide both sides by 29. And this is not going to be a number that's going to be exact. It's going to be a rounded number. So you end up getting 220.68. So if you sell 220 units, you actually don't fully break even. You're just under that. So in order to actually break even or better, you're going to have to sell approximately 221 units. That's just one way of solving it using equations. Another idea is to look at the amount of profit you make per unit. If you take in $35 per unit and it costs you $6 to make it. That means per unit you make $29. How many units are you going to have to sell to make the minimum $6,400 to break even? So simply just do 6,400 divided by the profit you make, and you get exactly the answer we already talked about, roughly 221 units. Now it looks much simpler than the one on the left. Both are viable options if they both make sense to you.